Well, thank you so much. Thank you to those who have stayed in the room with us, even though I know we're going a bit over time. I think it'll be well worth your while because this panel is really some truly esteemed folks in the space, and I can't wait to have this conversation. So I want to say thank you to Rich Lesser for that interesting panel beforehand, and also thank you to the Boston Consulting Group for acting as the primary knowledge partners with the First Movers Coalition. We really couldn't have pulled this all together without them. So, we've already heard in the prior panel talking about the theory of the First Movers Coalition, this demand signal, talking about what individual companies are doing. And in this case, we have made a really impactful demand signal, as I think, I'm not sure anyone has actually said this today, but our demand signal from the First Movers Coalition is $15 billion from 95 companies. So it's really quite an impressive force in the market. But of course, we recognize that demand is really just one portion of that equation. For projects to move forward and to make the market move forward, we need a combination of supply, demand, finance, and policy. And as you heard a bit from my boss, Secretary Kerry, from the U.S. perspective, we see this with the IRA, which helps build up the supply of clean technologies. And then on the other hand, we have the demand signal coming from the FMC. These are two parts of the equation coming together and hopefully being a bit stronger than the sum of its parts. So as we have this conversation with our panel today, I want to talk not only about the actions that you all are making, but how that broader ecosystem of public and private, of supply and demand, including philanthropy dollars and finance dollars, how all of that comes together to move projects forward. So with that, Ebba.
Yes.
We are so excited to have you on the panel. It is no secret that some of the most exciting movements in the hard-to-abate sectors are coming out of Sweden. We have a number of FMC members who are from Sweden who are all really not only first movers, but first movers within the first movers. We have Alfa Laval, we have Scania, we have SSAB, Vattenfall, Volvo. You heard today about some announcements that those different companies have made. You have taken a leading role in creating the enabling conditions for these kinds of projects to happen. So I want to maybe start by asking you, how are you thinking about the movement towards these new green industries? And in particular, how to actually take those projects and translate them into employment opportunities and benefits for your community, and actually just creating that enabling environment within Sweden?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here, and thank you for the question. And I think really part of the key is in the actual question. I don't know how you slept tonight, but I slept for 3 hours. And despite having slept for only 3 hours, I'm feeling a bit high on life, actually.
Wow.
Because listening to all of these first movers, and I've met so many of these companies only today since this morning, it really gives you hope. And I think that's key. That's key for me as a policymaker, as a deputy prime minister, to make sure that I have the support of the public for the transition that we are moving now. And I think the way to do that is by ruling more and leading more from a place of hope rather than fear. I have 2 children back home, a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and when I see good results as a mother, that's when I manage to premiere good behavior and see them moving into behavior that is good for them and that where they thrive. When they are threatened by something, when they fear, that's usually not a great place for big, long-lasting decisions. And actually, I try to think somewhat the same as Deputy Prime Minister as well, responsible for energy, industry, and business. I think the way to get more countries on board, more companies on board in the type of first mover moves that we are seeing now is showing that it is possible to combine economic growth with high-set climate targets. And the way to do that is for policymakers to set high, clear ambitions and goals, and then set the infrastructure. And in terms of Sweden, we're really seeing now a gold rush into Sweden, but people are digging for green gold. Green as in green transition, green as in making money. And what we have decided is that we will compete with fossil-free electricity system. We are now doubling our energy system. And when we do that, we also see investments going in. But I think if you want to use public money in combination with private money, you have to have public support as well. And then you have to show that it is possible, together with private capital, together with the companies, that it is possible to see more job opportunities and a stronger welfare when you reach your high-set climate targets. And I think that really is the key for Sweden, has been in us being as world leading as we are, despite our size, but that will also be the key for the future.
Fantastic. But I love green gold. I'm going to start using that. I never heard that before. For green money and energy. That's quite funny. Vincent, we're so thrilled to have you here on this panel today, and thrilled to have you as a first mover in our First Movers Coalition. Maersk, you guys have been leading the charge in deep sea decarbonization. Like Secretary Kerry mentioned, the launch of Laura Maersk. You guys have offtakes for green methanol. I think that's 500 kilotons annually. But you've managed to do this despite the fact that shipping is a really complicated sector. There are private and public actors like the government, IMO, port operators. There's just a lot happening in that ecosystem that you have to get through. So I think it would be interesting for all of us to hear a bit about what were some of the barriers that you all have faced as you've tried to push forward into green shipping, and how you've overcome those.
Yeah, I think. Is it working?
A little bit closer.
Maybe a little closer.
Yeah. Okay, that's much better. No, so I think for us, there was a couple of mention of this chicken and egg syndrome, and that was really the big thing that we had to overcome. Nobody wanted to build green ships because they were afraid there wouldn't be green fuel, and nobody wanted to develop infrastructure for green fuel because nobody was ordering green ships. And I think for us, it was just deciding that we were not going to wait for regulatory framework or for somebody else to go, but that we felt we had the wherewithal to do that. And so that's where we ordered Laura Maersk. That's where we followed also with 25 other ships. So we kind of broke this and said, okay, there is a market here. You can see it. It's a contractual commitment. Now let's engage with the ecosystem on the fuel side. And then what we found out is actually the quantities that we want or that we need to do the transition, that's a bankable offtake that can de-risk projects and actually accelerate the formation of a market for green fuels. But we haven't stopped there, because what we have done also is actually forge some really good partnerships with some of our customers to understand how we fit into their decarbonization agendas. I mean, one of them is right here with Amazon, Volvo. There's a few others in the room. This is absolutely key for us to really link the entire ecosystem from the production all the way up to our customers. Where we've gotten to now is this is not enough. This is not enough because a lot of all the companies actually with whom we've been able to get to targets and to join commitments are a lot of consumer-facing companies. And actually, more than 70% of the stuff that we move is actually raw materials, semi-finished goods, where the economic incentives today are simply not there for them to do the right thing. And if we want to wait for the market mechanisms to do that, it's going to take too long, and we don't have that time. And that's where, for me, the regulatory framework really needs to come into play. We have one advantage when you talk about shipping, and it is the fact that we are governed by one organization, the IMO. And so we can have one regulatory regime. And the MEPC 15 that was approved by the IMO earlier this year is a real turning point, I think, for providing the right framework for us to decarbonize a whole hard-to-abate sector at pace. And so we're very, very excited about it. There's a few X's in that framework that needs to be finalized during this year. One is the standards of the fuel. It cannot be that today we can sail out of China with a fuel that is considered green, and it's not considered green when it arrives in Europe. It poses a certain problem for us. So an harmonization of fuel standards and how we're going to approach the decarbonization of this and different standards that we're going to entertain are really, really paramount. And these can be, by the way, fuel agnostic. It's just how we're going to account for the carbon and the emissions that we're having. The second is also, Sultan mentioned it before, it is actually more expensive to decarbonize. Mm-hmm. And without a price on carbon, we're not going to do proper accounting for what is going on. And for us, coming with this balance fee, which will price carbon and actually help the green part of the sector coexist for the time of the transition with the traditional part of the sector and level the playing field so that we align the economic incentives of the players to do the right thing, so that we also make it easier for the producers of raw materials and finished goods to do the right choice, then we can get there. And it's actually not a very, very complicated thing. So we're quite optimistic, actually, that we are moving in that direction and that with this, we will be able to exceed, actually, the ambitions that are in the IMO framework. But it does require a continued pace. I would say we have done we've crossed a few milestones. There's quite a long road ahead.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for laying out the ways that you're all using partnerships, but some of the roadblocks that you're frankly coming up against and what you need to see from regulation. You mentioned Amazon. Kara, Amazon was one of the original members of the First Movers Coalition, and you guys have been a leader in the private sector driving reduction. You have recently joined a collaborative procurement for zero emission shipping. I think many folks know Amazon for the Climate Pledge. There's a lot of work that you guys are doing in this space. What do you see as the role that collaboration and procurement can play in accelerating the transition in some of these most critical sectors?
Yeah, I think most people were maybe surprised when we were one of the first members of First Movers Coalition because we don't look like some of the other companies. We're not a producer of steel or cement or in maybe heavy industrial. Amazon, most people associate with our e-commerce business and delivery of goods and services. We also have a cloud computing business. We have studios, advertising, and increasingly healthcare and satellites and other things. But we are not as similar, but we saw the opportunity building on some of the things we were doing, which we call using our size and scale for good, to really lean in and see how we could use our size and scale for good to continue to send demand signals. So I'll just quickly mention a couple of the ways in which we feel that it's really important for a company like Amazon and others to come along and demonstrate how we do that. We committed to our climate pledge in 2019. When we did that, we did a couple of things to demonstrate that we really wanted to see certain industries move along with us. We were having trouble getting vehicles at the time to electrify our last mile. Transportation and the built environment for us, with our fulfillment and logistics and our buildings globally, are two of the biggest kind of areas for us to work on from a carbon perspective. And so at the time, we ordered 100,000 electric delivery vans from a company called Rivian, which was the largest ever order of electric delivery vehicles. We now have 10,000 on the road. We'll have all 100,000 by 2030, which was really a big demand signal. We also have gone very big in renewable energy. So we're the largest corporate purchaser of renewable energy in the world. We have been for the last 3 years. We have a portfolio of about 23 gigawatts. So very large renewable portfolio across wind and solar, and that's across 23 countries across the world. So we continue to procure and send those demand signals and share what we know about how we're doing that, what financial mechanisms we're using. So in those areas, we are sending demand signals already. We want vehicles. We partner with Volvo. We partner with Maersk. We partner with many of these companies that we saw in the First Movers Coalition and doing amazing work. And we wanted to kind of lean in and say, what else could we do? So we started to look at some other sectors like shipping and aviation and transportation, the built environment, to continue to think about some of these harder to abate sectors, and thought, what a wonderful idea the First Movers Coalition was. So a couple of years ago in Glasgow, when we first committed, we made a commitment around our ocean freight to have 10% of our goods and services shipped globally by 2030, shipped with zero emission fuels, and 100% by 2040. And we're well on our way to that. But we've also done a couple of things moving collaboratively, as you mentioned, I think is the key, to build on that. So just to walk you through kind of how first movers can also help with collaboration, what we did last March was we launched a coalition with a number of other folks. At the time, there were 3 of us, Patagonia, Chibo, Aspen Institute, and Amazon. We launched the Zero Emission Maritime Buyers Alliance, and we said this is another way to show up collaboratively and send a demand signal that we want shipping services that are running on zero emission fuels. In the first 6 months, we grew to 25 members, and we just launched an RFP in September. And we're seeking in that tender shipping services for 600,000 20-foot containers that are going to run on zero-emission fuels. And so that's a big demand signal. So putting things out there, I think, helps to say that is a signal that we want these types of products and services. And we also are involved in sustainable aviation. We're part of the Sustainable Aviation Buyers Alliance. We are doing the same with COZEV in electrification of vehicles. And wherever we can partner in the industries where we need change, we will do so. We've changed our own building standards to procure more green steel. We are doing work both on our own building standards in concrete, but we've also created a $2 billion climate pledge fund, which we invest in early stage decarbonizing technologies. We've made 23 investments out of that fund so far, and that's in things like carbon cure, which we will use to decarbonize our own building materials. So we're both investing in those early stage decarbonizing technologies. We're trying to send demand signals through our procurement channels. We're going to encourage our suppliers to do so, and we're talking much more about that. And then we're partnering with industry and trying to create those coalitions and really move that way. And First Movers has certainly been a really key part of that.
Thank you, Kara. It's really inspiring to hear about all of those just many different ways that you guys are approaching this problem, but also really glad that you gave us a little bit more detail on some of those collaborative procurement activities, because that is a way that companies who might not have the scale of Amazon can think about, making a demand signal that actually is large enough to have an impact on the market. So thank you for walking us through that. For the last question of the panel, no pressure to you, Helen. Helen, you're joining us from ClimateWorks. When we talk about this discussion of, industrial decarbonization or the industry transition, folks might not immediately think about an obvious role for philanthropy. But that's not true. There is a role for philanthropy, as you know. So what do you think is the way that philanthropy can play a catalytic role in scaling industrial decarbonization and the required technologies to move us to a net zero future?
Thanks very much, Annie. And it's true, most of the time you don't think about philanthropy and what philanthropy is doing in this space, and that's a good thing. We're often behind the scenes, early stage, starting to help get the market moving in the first place, even investing in research and development, in some of the collaborations, the initial stages of these collaborations, to bring them together, which then take off. And so as they take off, we pull back, we're behind the scenes again, and the markets, the corporate players, the governments can actually move them forward. So really from the philanthropic side, we are able to come in early, we're able to be catalytic to really help drive and support action by governments, private sector, and the investment needed. We're able to be agile, switch direction as needed, test and try new things, take risks. If it fails, it's not failed big, it's failed small, and we're able to take that on and then move on to the next thing. So that's something that we've done, and I want to give a couple of examples, if I could, where we're already seeing this happening as philanthropy has stepped in really particularly in early stage to catalyze some of the work we need to really drive industrial decarbonization. And one of these is what's happened with Buy Clean initiatives, which are really very much a complement to the First Movers Coalition. The Buy Clean initiatives are where governments make public purchasing commitments to buy clean cement, clean steel, for example, in order to help build those markets. And this is important because if you actually look at government purchasing, in terms of cement, about half the cement we use is from government-funded construction and about a fifth of the steel. So governments can be really important levers for driving and demanding market, complementing what we're hearing here in terms of all the corporate action. And so back in 2017, we saw the first initial Buy Clean initiative and law go into place in California. There was a lot of work by philanthropy with lots of partners on the ground in advance to actually make the case, to be able to provide the evidence that this would be possible, how it could move forward, et cetera. And then with the success of that, to then take that, and it's now been adopted or is in the process of being adopted in 6 other US states. At the federal level, there's a task force on federal Buy Clean. And you mentioned, Annie, the wonderful Inflation Reduction Act and the impact that's having so many ways in the U.S. to decarbonize. The IRA now includes $4.5 billion for Buy Clean initiatives and another $6 billion for innovation. We're now seeing this kind of approach being taken up in Europe. We're seeing it in other parts of the world and moving forward. So again, it's something where philanthropy was able to be there early, to work with partners on the ground, to identify the opportunities, to be able to move this forward, to help catalyze this. As it takes off, it's the governments, it's the corporates who are going to deliver, who can really move it much faster. But philanthropy is able to be there, accelerate it right at the start, get it kicked off instead of waiting. The other example is one that's really important for a number of developing countries in particular, and this is about low-carbon cement. There's something called LC3, which is a new approach. It's limestone, calcinide, clay, I'm missing a word there. Cement, LC3, and it's a different way of holding the cement together. What we've used in most cases is fly ash and slag, either from as a coal byproduct or from production of steel. And these are things that are now in short supply, and particularly for developing countries, have been hard to actually access. The beauty of LC3 as a technology is that it is locally produced. It's able to be produced around the world. Both clay and the limestone are found many places. It's actually cheaper in many cases as a cement than the alternatives. And in addition to that, it is produced with 40% less greenhouse gas emissions per ton of cement produced. So really important in terms of reducing emissions, the opportunities it provides for local producers and construction in countries, and with locally sourced materials. The challenge is it's been new. It's now been proven, but it's new. And people are not familiar with this around the world. So one of the things philanthropy is doing is grouping together, working in a number of countries in Africa and India, elsewhere, starting to try and help the testing and the development of this, to start getting it to market, to provide education, information to local users and producers so that they can actually start to use this rather than the more traditional cement. And that's really started. It's on its way, and it's an important opportunity both for low carbon, but also for these communities and these workers to be able to actually move much more quickly and to save money as they do so. So it's not always that things cost more. Sometimes it's cheaper, but people are not aware of it and aren't able to move. So these are areas where philanthropy has come in early. As the markets take off, philanthropy can pull back, but initially helps to get it moving.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Ebba, Vincent, Kara, Helen, so much for joining us for this conversation. You know, we talk about the hard-to-abate sectors, and they are difficult to abate. It takes new technology scaling. It takes investment and will. It takes policy. It takes dollars up front. And I am heartened to hear about all the ways that you all, as players in this ecosystem, are collaborating together with other partners in the First Movers Coalition, with other partners more broadly. Thank you, everybody who joined us to listen into this conversation. Everyone have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.